Welcome everyone. You heard in there, I'm Justin Edge, I'm with Fiscal Legal Services, and welcome to the Citizens Guide to Affordable Housing Development. The idea basically for this came from the overwhelming response to the housing bond among some of the other affordable housing issues in the area, and questions from a lot of citizens that we hear who aren't involved in public policy, not involved in being on citizens boards, not involved in working on this in full-time jobs, wanted to know how to get involved. And as Dr. Dedmon was saying, this is a very wonkish area of policies complete with lots of acronyms, state, federal programs, lots and lots of programs. So the idea here is that we're going to give you an overview, and I can say that we've got several local housing policy experts here for you. So we're going to try to give you an overview of what you need to know to be able to talk about these issues in your communities and to be able to get involved as much as you would like. So with that, I'm going to just read some bios for everybody, and then we'll get started. So, first we have, and this is basically in the order that we're going to be presenting in today, Andy Barnett. Andy, you want to wave at everybody? Andy is the Executive Director for Asheville Area Habitat for Humanity. Over the last 2 decades, he served rural and urban habitat affiliates from job site to boardroom, motivated by the belief that a decent, affordable home in a vibrant neighborhood is a basic right and the foundation for success. He has a degree in housing studies from the University of Minnesota. Before moving to Asheville, Andy led a coalition of government agencies, community-based organizations, and philanthropy focused on improving housing stability and preventing gentrification in the most racially diverse neighborhoods in St. Paul, Minnesota. When he's not at work, he enjoys introducing his Midwestern wife and daughters to his home state of North Carolina. I'm a Midwestern transplant myself.
Justin and I have decided that we may be following sort of parallel tracks. The similarities are uncanny, and they just keep coming.
All right, so Heather Dillashaw, this is Heather, has worked in the community development sector for 20 years in nonprofit agencies and in local government. Currently, she is the Community Development Director for the City of Asheville, overseeing economic development, public service, and affordable housing activities and projects that serve low-income individuals and households in Asheville. Community engagement is a critical piece of this community development work, with the current priorities on equitable investment of these public funds across the City of Asheville. Scott Dedmon is the Executive Director of Mountain Housing Opportunities, local private charitable corporation serving Asheville and Western North Carolina. He's one of 7 volunteers who founded MHO in 1988 and repairing homes for elderly and disabled homeowners. Since then, MHO has built or financed over 1,200 homes and now serves 1,800 people each year through its programs of house construction, lending, leasing, home repair, and neighborhood revitalization. Scott joined the staff of MHO as Executive Director in 1993 after working for 12 years as a community educator at Fiscal Legal Services. He's a native of Red Bank, Tennessee, near Chattanooga, and a graduate of the University of Virginia. Before moving to Asheville in 1981, I did not know this, and I like this quite a bit. Scott worked as a railroad switchman and conductor on the south side of Chicago for 4 years. I had an earlier chapter of my life where I was a riverboat captain. True. Greg Borum, give him a wave. Greg Borum works as Director of Advocacy for Children First Communities and Schools in Buncombe County, coordinating public policy, advocacy, and partnership with volunteers, staff, and partner organizations. He has 25 years of experience in nonprofits, faith-based organizations, and community organizing and policy advocacy. Greg believes that nonprofits bring an important voice to policy decisions when they take time to build advocacy capacity based on their values. Besides being passionate about expanding opportunities for children's health, education, and well-being through public policy, Greg also searches for inspiration in music, nature, and friendships. Tawana Little, give him a wave, Tawana, is Marketing and Administrative Associate with Self-Help Credit Union, with responsibilities in marketing and community outreach, as well as collaborative work with local partners in economic development. She's also a newly appointed member of the City of Asheville's Affordable Housing Advisory Committee, a citizen committee that provides guidance to City Council's Housing and Community Development Committee. Formerly, she worked with Asheville Greenworks as water quality educator and community engagement coordinator. At Greenworks, Dewana developed and managed Youth Environmental Leadership Program, a paid internship for low-income women. Dewana has also been a key advocate for recycling access in low-income communities, helping implement recycling in 5 Asheville public housing developments. So quite a board here that we have up for you. I think Andy is going to start us off, and then we might shift the order a little bit to accommodate for some schedules here. But Andy, go right ahead.
All right. Good morning.
Good morning.
Well, I have the daunting task of trying to lay kind of some groundwork in terms of defining affordable housing and do it in the next 5 minutes. So let's see how we do it. That is one of the biggest challenges, I think, to really getting everybody aligned and out-hating the affordable housing problem, as Dr. Dedmon described it this morning, is we don't actually all have a common language to talk about this problem, and affordable means different things to different people depending on how you slice and dice it. So you may not agree to how I kind of defined this morning, but I want to give us some guidelines so that when you hear the rest of the panelists talk, and when we have conversations with each other as citizens working together and as citizens working with policymakers, we have a shared set of language. So to make that happen, we're going to choose the language from the Department of Housing and Urban Development. Not because that's the best definition of affordability, but because that's the most commonly shared language around affordability in the policy arena. So every year we get guidance from HUD for our local region on benchmark incomes for affordability, and they break out into about 3 different classes. So HUD says, you're either low income, very low income, or extremely low income. That is well, and moderate income. They don't really go above that, saying like, okay, you make too much money, and you need. But we sort of look at these chunks of moderate income, low income, very low income, and extremely low income. They basically break out, and so unlike most of the anti-poverty programs work with a percentage of poverty. So the federal poverty rate is this, and it's this regardless of family size and any other kind of situation. You have one number, that's the poverty rate, and all of the other anti-poverty programs work off of some percentage of 150% of poverty rate, 200% of poverty rate. All the qualifications are based off that. People who do housing are just weird, and we like to do our own thing. So we use a percentage of area median income, and it is different by the size of the household. So it gets really complicated really quick. What I've tried to do for you here on this sheet, and sorry it's not really pretty. Maddie tried to make it look prettier for me, and I just couldn't get my head around it. So you just have to deal with my Excel chart. But is give you a cheat sheet on what we're talking about with the different income brackets that HUD gives us to work with for defining the problem of affordable housing. So when we're talking about that bottom tier, that extremely low income group, that's 30% of area median income. Or to put it into numbers that real people actually deal with on a day-to-day basis, that's a family of 4 making $1,500 a month, give or take. So you can kind of do the math. I decided to go with monthly because that's how I like to think about my paycheck. So so if you take that, then when let me go through the rest of it. You can see there. So 60% of AMI 30 to 60 kind of is that very low income range. 60% of AMI to 80% of AMI is the low income bracket. And then you get into kind of moderate income, and then I made up one called middle income because that's the last really bracket that's easy to track, and I wanted people to be able to see where things fell the rest of the way up. Within that, to define how, so that gives you the income ranges. Within that, to define the affordability, we use 30% of income. All right, so 30% of that monthly income becomes what would be an affordable housing cost. So you can see that in that next column. 30% may or may not work. You know, there's a lot of debate about that. It used to be 20, then it was 25, then it was 30. People have been talking about maybe it's going to 35.
Now it's 40, I think.
Some of the programs? Okay, there you go. So it moves around. The other thing that's interesting about that is, you know, as other parts of people's household expenses change, like healthcare costs, it's all, you know, that affects the percentage of a household income as well. I'm going to try to keep this on time. So what we're looking at, though, is that 30% as the benchmark. If you flip to the other sheet, you've got a list here of different jobs in Asheville. That'll help you kind of get that into the conversation so that you can put a real human face, you know, who is that person that's at 30% of the area median income? So trying to give you that handle. The other thing I want to share from this chart is the problem of affordability gets worse the lower the income bracket you get to. That's not rocket science to anybody. The other thing that correlates really closely with with income in this community is the percentage of households in each one of those groups that are households of color, right? So race and income correlate pretty strongly all across this country, but here as well. The final column on that chart is talking about all the different housing strategies and where they kind of plug into that. And to Scott's point earlier today, some of them have to layer on to make it work. So you have, you know, LIHTC that helps us produce units that are affordable for folks at 60% of AMI. But then if you take a LIHTC unit and you layer on a housing choice voucher, then you're able to get down to that, you know, 30% and below. So a lot of these strategies layer. One of the things that struck me as I was putting this in here, it looks like there's a lot more programs at the bottom of things. That doesn't mean there's a lot more resources there. I would say if you're anybody who, you know, has looked at systems, systems that have a lot more patches tend to represent poorer quality systems, right? So a solution that's just one solution is generally a better solution. When we get down to the very bottom of our work, we have just a lot of little fixes to fix what is basically a patchwork solution. All right, I'm almost there. I want to bring your attention then to this bar chart to give you a little sense of the needs. We've heard a lot from Dr. Dedmon this week about folks spending more than 50% of their household income on rent and utilities. This gives you the breakdown here in Buncombe County. Folks spending more than 50% of their income on housing costs. That's the dark blue band on this sheet. Folks spending between 30 and 50% of their income on housing. That's kind of the mid color. And then the light blue are the folks that have affordable housing. What you see is really clearly that, you know, again, not rocket science, but the less money you make, the larger percent of your income you're spending on housing, right? Because at some point, housing costs are just fixed. The curve on housing costs doesn't go all the way down to the bottom, but the curve on income goes all the way down to the bottom. So we wind up with this situation where, you know, folks are, to Dr. Dedmon's point, most of the poor households in our community are not getting any kind of benefit, they're in the market, in the regular housing market, and they're paying regular market rent, and they're paying, you know, a significant portion of their income in housing. Now, when I made this chart, I got super depressed, right? I'm just gonna own it. Like, I looked at this, it came up on the screen after I monkeyed around in Excel, and I looked at it, and I turned the computer off and went for a walk. It doesn't really do any good for all of us to sort of just get stuck in how big the problem is and how big the need is and how unsolvable it is. So I came back and I said, okay, let's look at those light bars. There are some people, there's about 25% or so of the folks who are very low and extremely low income who have affordable housing. How did that happen? Well, we started adding it up among the folks on this panel, and we could just about account for all 4,000 of those households between public housing, housing choice vouchers, folks who are in light-tech developments. You know, what that told me is our solutions work. We have solutions that get folks at even extremely low incomes into affordable housing. We just don't have it at scale. And that was right what we heard from Dr. Dedmon this morning. Scale has to be on the table. We have to figure out the dosage question. We have the treatment, we just don't have enough doses of the treatment. So that's what I want us to focus on, you know, what I think the rest of the panelists are going to do, and now that I've almost gone over my time. So that's what the rest of the panelists are going to do is talk about specific treatments that they're using in the community, and then how we take those things and get them scaled up. How do we out-hate this problem, as Dr. Dedmon started with us in our first session. So, Scott, you want to start with the solution side?
Thank you. I'll apologize. I have to be out of here in 9 minutes, and it's a meeting that I really have to be at. I wanted to ask quickly who we have in the audience. How many of you are governmental, or local government, governmental? Great. And how many are in housing development, either nonprofit or for-profit? Okay. Shout out, please, with who you are if you're not those two. What?
Business owner.
Business owner?
Realtor.
Realtor, great.
Retiree, private citizen.
Retiree, private citizens? Who
Aging
else?
services.
Pardon?
Aging services.
Aging services, great, okay.
Workforce development, needing housing.
Great,
Healthcare.
okay. Thank you. It's very much like the audience that we had in 1988 that Jim Barrett referred to. That conference was called Nonprofit Housing Development for Low-Income People. Kind of a specific topic. 150 people showed up on a Friday morning and a Saturday morning, and it did result in the origination of Mountain Housing Opportunities, and I think lots of other partnership efforts. So that was 29 years ago. I want to go over Andy's charts here real quickly, just to kind of distinguish one thing from another, very much in the same way that he has, but on the Asheville AMI sheet with area median income, Asheville AMI cheat sheet, I'd like to make a mark between extremely low income at the top and then very low income, which is the next line. Because pretty much everything that was discussed last night, and if you're talking about homelessness or people that are elderly or disabled on SSI income, and that's a Social Security, very low income, that has the income that is shown here below 30% of the area median income. And even though the top of that for a household of 4 people is $18,000 a year, I did the math real quick from $1,500 a month. Most people are not in 4-person households, and most people are not anywhere near that income that are at 30% of the area median income. And is anybody here from the Asheville Housing Authority? David Nash, oh, he's right there in the middle. Well, in discussions like this, when we're focused partly on expanding supply as quickly as we know how to do, public housing, including the Asheville Housing Authority, doesn't get enough credit because between their 1,500 plus housing choice vouchers, that's also known as Section 8 voucher, some of which are veterans VASH vouchers, between those vouchers and their 1,500 plus, probably closer to 1,700 or 1,800 public housing units. Now switching for a minute to the blue bar chart, the affordable housing at the bottom, I'll circle it on mine, so it's the light, at the very right of the bottom two charts. Okay, there's a light colored bar with 2,800 plus and then 1,400 plus at the bottom. Those two light colored bars are low-income people who are in affordable housing. And the very lowest income, unfortunately, the census breakouts go all the way up to 20,000, so you don't see in here who's below 15 or 10,000 because of the census breakout. But the great majority of the end of that chart on those bottom two bars, the affordable households, the ones that are in affordable housing, are being served by the Asheville Housing Authority. Over 3,000, that's 4,308 if you add those two numbers together in the light colored end of the bars. That's 4,308, and well over 3,000 of those are being served by the Asheville Housing Authority right here in Buncombe County. And please, let's always remember that. We don't talk about it because nobody in Congress is saying, oh, let's start building more public housing. It's just not happening, and I can't see it happening in the next 5 or 10 years. Mountain Housing Opportunities serves in the 20,000 blue bar at the bottom. More than half of our residents are in that blue bar. They're just not in more than half are not in the very lowest income on your other chart that goes down to about $10,000 a year. Or if you don't have disability, you might have zero income. As I said this morning when I was being argumentative, only 42% of our resident households are in that very lowest, below 30% of median income. Where with David Nash, who's sitting in the back with public housing, the great majority of their residents are in that 10,000 or below, maybe 15,000 below. If I misstate anything, David, just
75%.
I'm sorry, how much?
Between 75 and 80%.
Are below 30% of the area median income?
Across all programs.
Good. So,
David, there's an extra chair up here.
yeah. So there's an expert right here in the middle of the back of the room. That's David Nash. And if you, so to Matthew Dedmon's point, that where he's most comfortable, and I know this is true because of legal services as well, and I worked there for 12 years, their focus is those folks whose incomes are below $10,000 a year, and the welfare checks that are described in Matthew Dedmon's book in Wisconsin are about $500 a month. So, many of the checks that are mentioned are welfare checks there. So what is that? That's $6,000 a year. And what I would like to say is, if you can serve some people that are in the working population whose incomes are 20 and 25, and even when you look at the LIHTC 60% of area median income, even in the low 30,000s a year, if you have a family of 4 or 5, you can get into our tax credit housing up in the mid 30,000s per year. But those help to make it work, because the people who have $800 or $900 a month of SSI income, they've got so little to put toward your operating costs and toward the debt that you took on to build the building, that I don't know how to build a building with all of my residents being at $600 or $700 a month. I can't build it and I can't operate it. And nobody will lend me money for the cash that I don't have in equity. Nobody will lend me money to build that building. So it's, and we're actually even trying to start a model now where we may go up as high as $40,000, and that, you know, Fiscal Legal and Matthew Dedmon really doesn't want to hear that, but we may go up to 40s and for the workforce, for Asheville's workforce. And we're talking with employers right now about a employer-assisted housing development fund. And that's a terrible name, but right now I'm calling it, my wife doesn't, I floated this name with my wife last night. She doesn't like it, but we'll see. We're calling it Voila. Or Voila. Work in Asheville, W-A, live in Asheville, okay? Because so many employers, and I'm talking hoteliers, restaurants, and brewers, nonprofits, yeah. Education, legal, the legal system, or legal sector, finance, all of those trades, and there's, I mean, we're talking 30, 40, 50,000 of our workforce. So many are having to move to Marion, McDowell County, or Brevard, or Haywood County, and especially Madison County. More than half of the employed people in Madison County are commuting to Asheville for their work, because there's more houses than jobs in those surrounding counties. Yes, and in Buncombe County, there are more jobs than housing. So, you guys help me think of a better name, but for right now, it's called Voila. Work in Asheville, live in Asheville. And we're trying to figure out mathematically, and a lot of this is just crunching spreadsheets, if we have a certain number of folks that are making $40,000, $45,000 a year in Asheville's workforce, how many people who make $10,000 a year who have mental health needs? I hope you go to the workshop about mental health that's coming up in a few minutes. People that are down at the income that's in Matthew Dedmon's book and services, the eviction services or fiscal legal services, most of them have down around $10,000 or less per year, per month, no, $10,000 or less per year in income, or less. And so we're trying to get an income mix that will blend, and so the ones that are paying more in rent will help the building work with the ones who have almost nothing to pay in rent. So I don't know if I've covered the topic. I will be around about an hour and a half from now. I'll be back. So if anybody wants to talk.
We're going to have questions at the end.
But he's leaving now.
No,
Please come.
come up to me at lunch. I'll be back in an hour and a half. So.
Can you require them to give up their car if they move into the city?
No.
Get money from the environmental?
No, but we won't always subsidize their car. We are looking at buildings right now that have no parking except as required for handicap accessibility. And we're saying that 10 or 15% of the units will be for handicapped and elderly folks, because we can't discriminate against handicapped or elderly folks in a building that is intended to serve the workforce. But if you're on a bus line or a block from a bus line and you're in downtown Asheville, we may provide no parking or almost no parking. So thank you, sorry.
Yeah, I'm sorry if I forgot to mention that. Let's try to do the Q&A at the end. I know a lot of people need to come and go throughout the day, so that's how we're trying to value everybody's time. So Heather is up next.
So with that really optimistic overview of where we are. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what the city of Asheville can and can't do, right? The things that we are doing. I think that there's some of you I know very well in the room, and you know what we are doing, but some of you don't. One of the things that's really important to know is that North Carolina is not a home rule state. What that means practically is that we cannot require developers to build affordable housing. Okay? You understand what that means?
Could you say what it's called again? We're not a what?
We're not a home rule state, we're a Dillon's rule state, which means that
A what real estate?
Dillon's rule. And so that means that the General Assembly does not allow us to require the private market to do anything about affordable housing. Everybody understand what that means? So when you come to the city and you say, why are you not doing this? It is because we literally cannot. We are not allowed to. The tool that makes the most impact in affordable housing and creating actual sustainable household income across the spectrum is called inclusionary zoning, and we cannot do it. Okay? So, in that context, and I know Davidson does it, she's here, and that's great, but they got in before all this came up, and so we are not allowed to do it. What that does mean is we've had to get really creative around the ways that we can try and incent that or require developers through other processes to make that happen. So we passed an affordable housing bond. That's one thing. I'll talk about that in a minute. But the legal avenues that we have to require the private market are all through the planning and zoning process. And so what that means is if a developer comes and says, I want to build XYZ residential units on this piece of property, but their housing plan is not a by right development, they can't just do it without asking for certain permissions or certain variations from what that site allows. They have to go through a conditional zoning process, and that has to go to city council, and city council can ask them for whatever they want. And so, when a developer does that now, we say, okay, we'll give you a conditional zoning, but you have to do a certain percentage of affordable units in this development in order for us to give you the zoning. Every single time that we've asked that, and council has stood up and voted for that, it has happened. Because what the developer wants is to build that building, right? And so the practical implication of that for the developer is their profit margin is less than it would be, but the reality is they're still making a pretty good amount of money in Asheville's market, right? Because the average two-bedroom apartment in Asheville is over $1,000 right now, right? And has been for a while. Rents have been climbing 4 to 6% every year, which is an extraordinary jump every year. Crash is coming, I think. But so in that conditional zoning process over the last 4 years, we have now 223 units that are affordable units in market rate developments. So we are actually producing mixed income developments. They're just flying under the radar because you don't know they're there, right? So we're trying to do a better job of communicating about that. But there are, drive down Hendersonville Road, you drive out of East Asheville, some of these really big complexes that look like you can't afford them. There are units in there that you can, that accept vouchers, that are affordable to folks at 80% AMI below without vouchers. They're there. You just have to know where they are. And so you can find that on our website. So that is the legal method that we have. That's it. 223 is better than zero, where we were 4 years ago in those developments. If y'all have been here for a few years, when South Asheville first started booming, right, we weren't doing that. And so several of those complexes went up with no affordable units in them at all. But everything that has come since then, that has had to go through a conditional zoning process, we have affordable units in. So that's one way that we do it. The other context around $25 million of a housing bond in our housing trust fund is some of what Scott said around cost. If you think about $25 million sounds like a lot of money. When you're talking about development, it's not. That's the hard thing, right? Is that $25 million, we hope, will get us between 500 and 1,000 new units, if we're lucky, right? It's not a lot of money. Because the way that construction costs are right now, and Andy can tell you, it's because he's developing in Asheville with Habitat, it just doesn't get us very far down the road. And so the way that cities use these dollars is really as leverage points. We use them upfront as construction dollars. We do not have the deep federal subsidy that David has at the Housing Authority for ongoing rent, right? So the really hard part about what that means is we cannot subsidize units on our own at 30% AMI below. We do not have pockets deep enough to do that just with construction dollars. That takes ongoing rental subsidy over a very long period of years to be able to afford those rents. For the development to be able to hold those rents, not the but for the development to be able to operate at those rent levels. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. The difference between construction dollars pulling down the cost of a project and then ongoing rental subsidies, right? And so what we do is put in construction dollars up front to try and bring down the cost of the project so that more of those units can be affordable. And with all the, any money, any public dollars from the city of Asheville that go into a project, that development has to accept housing vouchers. That is a requirement. which means, as David just said, with 75 to 80%, David, are at 30% and below, that those developments have those folks in them because some of them have those vouchers. Now, the flip side of that is we don't have enough units to use the vouchers we have right now, right? So we need more units on the ground. And our unit deficit is 5,000, right? We're at a unit deficit of 5,000 affordable units. That's just in Buncombe County. The region is higher.
Oh, in the county, not just the city?
In Buncombe County,
Okay.
yeah. The city is the densest part of the county, but yes, 5,000 units in Buncombe County are needed to meet need, right? So that's the projected need over the next 7 years. It's probably higher than that, but that's the gap that we're at. And so when you look at the city's affordable housing strategies, we're looking at using the dollars that we have as leverage in construction. We're looking at using conditional zoning in every development project that comes through. We're looking at using city-owned property that we already own outright as equity into a deal so that we turn that property over to a developer or we ground lease it for a long time with permanent affordability attached to it. Taking the land cost out brings down the cost of the development, right? So when you take out the acquisition costs from the developer, then we have a better shot at getting more affordable units. One of the things we are interested in, and this is, and you'll hear the differences of opinion about this, we are more interested in mixed income developments than in solely 30% AMI developments. And there's a couple of reasons for that. One is a social solution issue. Siloing off poverty does not seem to have worked very well in our country. I think most people would agree with that. That the health of our community depends on every neighborhood in Nashville having everybody in it, right? That my daughter should be living in a neighborhood that has all the people in her school in that neighborhood and not just the people, like she has, 2 parents that work full-time and have, like there should be people of all income brackets in every neighborhood in Nashville. That's a sustainable social solution for a number of reasons, right? And we know that the more housing stability we bring, and there's data to show this from homelessness to folks on disability, you name it, the more housing stability we bring, the more stable the whole community is, right? If you have a place to live, you're not in crisis about that. Anyway, there's a number of things, right? And there's our homelessness folks are here, and they can say more about that. But so that's the overview kind of what the city can and can't do and the strategies that we're trying. I know there's at least one person running for office in the room, maybe more. I know Jeremy's back there. Who else? BJ. So talk to these folks. Because when those conditional zoning projects come to council, if these are the folks that end up on council, they're the ones who to make the decision about how that happens, right? So staff, we give council all the information that we have, and then council is the one who makes those decisions. And so when you have private developers pushing back against that, saying we can't afford to do that, your job is to tell council we can't afford not to do that, right? We can't afford not to hold the private market accountable as a part of the solution for housing for everybody in Nashville. And that's kind of where the city has a little bit of play, not as much as we need. And I'm hoping by the time my daughters are grown up, North Carolina might be a different place, but who knows, right? She's 9, so maybe by then, but we have not enough authority, but we're doing what we can with the authority that we have. And so the question I'm asked the most is, why do you not invest in folks at 30% AMI below? We do, in the ways that we can. And the way that we do that, in the housing development world, is that every project that has our dollars in it has to accept vouchers. And every project that has our dollars in it does have people with vouchers in it. That's what we can do because we don't have the pocket to provide rent subsidy. We just don't have it. That's low income housing tax credits and the federal subsidy that comes from the housing authority. Those are the only 2 pots of money that do that.
Thank you, Heather. Next, we're going to move to Greg and Dewana, and they're going to tell us a little bit about, we're going to basically bridge into how you begin to think about getting your organization or your place of work involved, and how do you get involved as an individual citizen. So, who's first?
Hi, I'm Greg Warren with Children First Communities and Schools, and I do not claim to be a housing expert. I just got the lucky ticket to sit up here alongside several of them. But I do claim to be a housing advocate. And want to talk a little bit about why we think that getting more organizations, nonprofits, faith communities, health providers, and then just folks in the general public to see themselves as housing advocates and how we got there as an organization. You heard Dr. Matthew Dedmon make the comment that we need, I think he said, like thousands of people trying 1,000 different things to really address this problem. I'm not so sure we need 1,000 different strategies. That might be a little too complex. I think we've got probably a few bucketfuls that could really do the job, but I do agree that we need thousands of people. And I think that one of the places where we've seen success as an organization is to get other organizations to start thinking collaboratively about how to be advocates and show up side by side, because as Dr. Dedmon said, this issue really cuts across everything that we care about. And so Children First Communities and Schools, we don't develop affordable housing. We provide services to support children's success and their family success. We have staff who work in 5 local schools. We have 2 after-school learning centers, one in Pisgah View, one in Woodridge Apartments in the Emma community. We have a family resource center on the campus of Emma Elementary School. So we are really working around, educational achievement, but we also begin to see the impacts of affordable housing to being able to meet our goals with these children and families. And specifically through our Family Resource Center, we provide emergency assistance. And last fiscal year, I think we provided one-time assistance to about 60, to families that represented about 66 children to help pay a bill, help pay for rent, do something. All of that really just to keep them from being part of the evicted story, right? And so that hits the families that we work with every day. We have a student support specialist in Estes Elementary School. If you followed the story about the Miami Circle displacement and eviction of that trailer park, those children also went to Estes Elementary School. They had elementary school children. So we saw that impact. We have an Americorps program. How many folks know about Americorps? If you don't, find out it's kind of like a domestic Peace Corps, and it's really popular with a lot of young people. It's not age limited, so don't the seasoned folks among us can also be Americorps volunteers, but it's very popular for students who are coming out of college. It helps, provides a very basic living stipend, and then provides an education award for either pay off student loans or to continue your education. All the Americorps members that we have generally qualify for food assistance because that's how low the stipend is, and increasingly we're having trouble recruiting our Americorps members who then go and work in schools and after-school programs with youth because they can't find housing in Nashville. They're facing that. So we saw that also showing up in our organization. And so several years back we decided that hey, we need to be familiar with what we can do and how we can advocate. We definitely have this value of helping children and families succeed, and clearly something that's standing in that way is housing. It's the lack of housing in the community. So we we used to do these things called the Child Watch Tour back then, where we would pick an issue and kind of try to put people on a bus and really explore it for about a half day. And we chose housing as that, and got Habitat and Mountain Housing, and really talked about what the housing issues look like in the city. And from that, we began to try to convene people who were interested in affordable housing and coming together. We were doing that under an initiative that we have called the Success Equation, which is to really unite our community so that all children can thrive. And we have 3 focus areas in that, and that's looking at interventions for early childhood in those early years. We know that making sure that children are healthy and cared for and ready to succeed in school are critical. We look at family supports and making sure families are supported in their both basic needs and kind of social needs, and then we look at family economic stability. And we really saw housing as a key driver for all those things. And so we were really fortunate that I was really fortunate that the experts in our community would go out to coffee with me or sit down and really help me understand the acronyms like LIHTC and median income and area median income, and there's a lot of jargon, and in your handout you also have this great like housing affordability terms. So we spent a lot of time just trying to get up to speed because there's a lot of lingo in the affordable housing realm. And so my first kind of lesson is, if you're going to be a housing advocate, you need to put your learning cap on. Do you need to be an expert in this? Do you need to have Andy and Scott's levels of knowledge? I don't think anyone will ever come close to those kind of things in their lifetimes. But you need to know some general things. You do need to commit to being a learner. And then we started looking at, I think the second lesson is collaboration. We knew that this issue impacted us as a child-serving organization, and so we linked up with organizations who were doing housing. We linked up with like On Track, and I see other members of our housing team, Fiscal Legal Services, and we started just kind of convening some regular meetings to try to talk through, well, what can we do, how can we advocate? And so a few years back, we kind of finally were ready to release our first success equation housing advocacy policy strategy for this city. And I pulled it up to kind of look at where we've come from, but our 4-point agenda back then was to increase city funds budgeted for affordable housing construction, require that new development helps increase the supply of homes that are affordable for working families. Back then, we were really still thinking that we might have a chance to pass inclusionary zoning flat out. Nashville, the landscape has changed in the legal opinions and climate change on that one. Number 3 was don't allow landlords to discriminate against renters based on participation in housing assistance programs. And 4, support the city in developing policies for land banking or using their properties to increase the stock of affordable housing. So it was really great to have so many organizations help us think through that and come out with that strategy. And we started showing up at Affordable Housing Advisory Committee meetings and pestering city staff. They started seeing us a lot more, became part of the peanut gallery there. And then, continuing to spread this message out to folks who are, in faith communities, on our email list, our donors and volunteers, and getting them to raise these issues, ahead of city council strategic planning meetings. And I think that what we've seen, we can't take credit solely, never, but that as more folks began to have a kind of like, oh, here's some messages we can repeat and we can do, that those started hearing those repeated back. And then, as we see with kind of where we are now, that with the city, working on helping the city pass the affordable housing bond, that was a big campaign for ours last year, that this hits on some of the issues, that seeing the city, move their affordability targets for their programs. And I just want to call out too that, the city having this housing trust fund is an amazing resource, because what you learn quickly with all these acronyms, that there's so many things that are regulated by federal rules and funding streams and requirements. But the housing trust fund is ours. Like we own that. The policy we set for the housing trust fund doesn't have to go back up to Washington for approval. It goes to city council, it goes to the Housing Community Development, it goes to Affordable Housing Advisory Committee. So we can shift policy around the housing trust fund comparatively, and we have comparatively very quickly compared to trying to turn the ship of federal funding streams, right? So that's an amazing resource, and I just want to call out too that the county has also put a lot of money into affordable housing, but we also are taking a similar advocacy approach and trying to raise their awareness to be more strategic and show up and consider how they can create more long-term resources. So with that, I'll stop, but I just want to say, nonprofit organizations, faith communities, health providers, everyone, get in the advocacy game. There's a lot to learn, but don't be intimidated. And if we can play a role in helping you navigate that path, we're all in it with our learning hats on too. We want to do that because the more we can show up with a collective voice and support people who are on the Housing Advisory Committee and at the Housing Community Development, and show up to council and county commission with this call that this is the critical issue, that's needed. We need that voice in our community, and we want to be part of raising that.
Let's talk about it, but I would like to ask everybody to refer to this page of the handouts. Because I will speak around some things that are relevant to it. I joined the Affordable Housing Committee, thanks to that was Friday, but mainly because it was a lack of representation. And so often we have these conversations around affordable housing without the people who are directly impacted by the issue in the room. The ones who are dealing with homelessness due to lack of housing, the ones who are out on the market trying to find housing. And it's good to note that housing does do a great job of accommodating the very low incomes. They do a great job of covering that big gap, but at the same time, it's people that's in these housing developments that want home ownership. So building buildings is great, but if there's no ownership, and that's one thing that Dedmon touched on, is majority of the white population that living in home ownership. And I hate to keep circling back to the racial lines, but the racial lines are clear. And people who are not white would love to own homes too, and I want to keep that as a disclaimer. We would love to own our own homes as well. So it's that dynamic that we're battling. It's not just building apartment developments. It's not about just the developer side of things. It's the other side of things. What about these people who are working and they are in low, according to the scale, oh my gosh, low, very low income, but at the same time would like to move into home ownership? What are their options? What does that look like outside of Habitat and Mountain Housing? And Housing actually got a home ownership program, which is kind of awesome. But once you get over a certain income, you don't qualify for that. So it's like, it's that gray area for people who are low income, but making too much to qualify for anything, but making too less to benefit from anything. So it's like, it's that gray area, and I actually fall into that gray area, and I'm actually dealing with that. So it's like, what about that gray area for people who want to move into home ownership, who have worked hard, tied up their bootstraps, and did what they had to do to put themselves in a position to really start considering home ownership on a serious level? What does that look like when the ratio and the definition that we're using by HUD standards for affordability in Asheville is unaffordable? And I always draw back to that definition. I'm glad you clarified with this great graph, but it's unaffordable. Affordable is really unaffordable. And that's the realness of the situation that we're dealing with. So me joining the Affordable Housing Advisory Board was wanting to be that voice at the table to say that, okay, look on this side, we're renters over here. Let's look, how is this beneficial to renters? How is this going to be affordable to us? I get the development side, and I know that the cost is high on the end, but I also know that the cost of not having affordable housing far outweighs the benefits to the developers. When we have a real housing crisis here, and we have so many that's don't have homes, that's homeless. It's crazy in this beautiful city when you can ride through the city and see so many people without homes. You can go to a shelter and feed over 150 people for every feeding, and seeing different faces at every feeding. It's sad when we have such a rich community, but it's a great percentage of our population that's living without. But we are so liberal, and we are a great city, and I love Asheville. I'm born and raised there. This is where I grew up, and I love Asheville, and I know it's the potential for change. It's not to say we done came to this place and, oh, we just doomed to be here forever. No, we have to make conscious decisions, and we have to be intentional about really tackling this issue. It's a multi-level issue. It's not just a city council issue. It's not city staff issue. It's not the county issue. It's an all of us issue. And that's what one thing I liked about his talk last night and this morning is his intention is like, this is an all of us thing. This is not, oh, I live here and I don't want them in my backyard, but it's not about that, because it's about the kids who are our future. It's about the families, the households that type of thinking negatively marginalizes. We can't be explicit and inclusive. Like, it's just no way to do that. Not in my community. And it's crazy because me and my father, I'm 3 generations here, natives. So my father, born and raised here, the dynamics that he saw growing up, he went through the urban renewal thing when he hit Asheville. So that's the era that my parents grew up in. And now we're facing it again with the massive gentrification of minorities pushed to outside of Asheville. And that's another issue. It's just a different name, but it's happening. And we have to recognize our issues for what they are so that we can get the people who are directly impacted by this at the table. When we say equity, that means having the people who are directly impacted by this at the table. If you have never been through this, if you have never dealt with homelessness, lived it, if you have never lived with not having a job and trying to provide for your kids, or the challenge of going to apply for benefits, or housing, subsidized housing, and the challenges of navigating through that system while trying to keep from going into further debt. And if you haven't lived with those stresses, you cannot relate. You can hear about it and know it sounds like a bad thing, and I wouldn't wish that on anybody, but you cannot relate to the feeling of actually being in it and living through it, and the impacts on your family and the impacts on your household. You gotta go in your room and shut your door and cry because you don't know how you're gonna feed your kids the next day and you got bills too. So that perspective at all of these tables for all of these conversations is absolutely needed, but it has been not present. The inclusion of marginalized community members in these conversations has been limited. And it's more than doing a survey and, oh, we surveyed and we got this. It's more than that, because the conversation is deeper than that. The impacts are greater than that. And I sit on all of these things. I'm actually a part of the Community Land Trust, thanks to the city and the House of Bond. So I'm excited about that, because that's given us an opportunity to look at what long-term affordability really looks like, and really give us a chance to really play with the idea of like long-term affordability for our city, where our communities are diverse. It's sad when you've got a community and everybody look like you when you walk out the door. That's crazy, because that's not what our kids are dealing with when they go into the schools. That's not what they're dealing with when they go into the mall. That's not what they're dealing with in life, and it's not a realistic setting. It really gives room for all of this biased mind, way of thinking to play out. Because when I go home, everybody looks like me, everybody's household is 2 parents. Like, it's not a realistic view. Who's to say that y'all go grow up and have that same type of household for their family? Families look different. Traditional families are not as visible as the 1-parent households. So it's really recognizing that this is an everybody issue. When we're talking about the ideas at the Community Land Trust, let's get the people who are directly impacted by gentrification at the table, so we can have those real conversations and really get input from them, because they live in it. When we're talking about affordability and what we're going to use this money from, what does that really look like? Get people at the table, regardless of their socioeconomical status, their skills and their talents that they bring and that they inhabit is not determined by how much money they make or what community that they live in. You will be amazed to see how many brilliant, brilliant people are in these communities. How many advocates, how many leaders are in these communities that's doing this work, that's helping to pull the strings and the pieces of our community together, that's keeping us grounded, that's providing hope in an environment that produces hopelessness. It's just amazing, and I'm one of those people, I just have to say, like, as we move forward and we think about these conversations, try having these conversations with people that's not impacted by it. Try having these conversations with people that don't look like you. Let's be intentional. And I'm sorry, I'm a call to action type of person because it's just that serious and it's just that big of an issue that we have to stop talking and start taking action if we really want to be serious about changing this for our kids and our future and really want to change the dynamics of Asheville. So I hate to see that this seems like a call to action, but it is. And it's just like, I don't know no other way to say it. I stand on these committees, I be a part of all of these conversations because it does matter. And it matters to my community and people that look like me and people that don't look like me, it matters. And until we can all sit in a room and share perspective and understand that we're not always going to agree. No, this is not an easy conversation. Nothing that's worth having has ever been easy to do. Nothing that's really had a long-lasting impact came easy. I remember when we fought for women's rights. You know what I mean? So it wasn't easy. It didn't come overnight. We went out and protested one time and it came overnight. My mama still talk about how she was on campus burning her bras and stuff. So I know it wasn't an easy thing. I'm just saying, like, nothing that really lasts came easy. It came from those hard conversations, that uncomfortableness with talking about race and racism, because it is an issue. You can't ignore the issue and solve the problem. So I just ask for equity as we all are having these conversations. Everybody's here because they do care about affordability and affordable housing, and they do recognize that there is a housing crisis here. I just ask that we be inclusive. You want to have this conversation, you can go downtown and sit in the drum circle and talk to people all day and see what their experience has been so that we can make informed decisions and we can do it in a productive way, in an inclusive way. Equity and inclusion is an issue. It is something that we all need to be thinking about seriously and how to do it better moving forward, especially around this conversation.